Hello viewers, we've got a lot to cover today, but we'll keep it brief. OpenAI's latest release focuses a lot on audio, especially text-to-speech and speech-to-text models, and we should definitely talk about that. Plus, I've been wanting to do an episode on audio transcription, so we're going to blend those topics together. Let's dive into what we're discussing today. First up, we'll go over a straightforward method for creating audio or video transcriptions completely free. We'll be using our favorite service, Grok, for this process. I get that advanced users might find this a bit dull, but don't worry, it's a quick topic, and we'll move through it swiftly. Next, we'll briefly talk about OpenAI's new speech-to-text models and see what the company is highlighting. We'll also explore how this could be beneficial for us. Then, the moment of truth will arrive, and we'll discover who's really on top. Does our trusty old Whisper still stand a chance? Or is the new model from ElevenLabs superior? Everyone says their model is the best. Let's find out what the truth is and which one is truly worth using. Finally, a few words about why choosing open source matters, and a brief summary. Alright, without further ado, let's begin. You already know Grok from many of my previous videos. Not only is it great and fast, but it also offers API keys for free. Let's log into the developer console, where the playground is available. Then we can choose from a wide variety of large language models, including the Whisper model. At this point, it's worth thinking about why we even need transcription. Maybe you want to turn your voice notes into text, or you have a recorded lecture from university that you'd like to turn into notes. Or maybe you would like to prepare a summary of the training you attended. Or perhaps you just want subtitles for your favorite movie. Transcription comes in handy in these situations. With this interface in Grok, you can effortlessly convert your audio or video files into text. Alternatively, we can try something else. For testing, let's just use a microphone. 1, 2, 3, 4, Whisper model test. The recording has been saved. Now we need to submit it. As you can see, Whisper did a good job with this task. However, when it comes to punctuation, the text could be interpreted in different ways. Ultimately, though, people can also write it in various ways. If I wanted to use a microphone for transcription every time, it would be much more convenient to just use AI voice keyboard. This program works the same way, and when you want just to type by voice, it's definitely more convenient. 1, 2, 3, 4, Whisper model test. As you can see, this time the punctuation is somewhat different, but that happens especially with short texts. Let's get back to the transcription from the file, since that's our main focus today, and likely what the dearest viewers are expecting. First, I'll play the recording and send it to Whisper via Grok Playground. Then, in the next step, we'll compare the quality of all the models using this recording. Let's start with a good quality recording test. It's worth saying a few words that might be misrecognized. SAP, Fiori. Transaction ST22. SAP all permissions. DeepSeek R1 model. Function load_.env. It is known that models have a bigger problem recognizing proper names, just like humans do. That's why I use some problematic expressions. I pick a file from my computer and upload it to the playground. As you can see, the result is quick because the file is short, but even for a half-hour recording, you won't be waiting excessively long. All the words were recognized correctly, which is great. We realize that SAP all should be written with an underscore and uppercase. But that's really niche knowledge, so the model doesn't need to catch that detail. The function name for loading environment variables should be written differently, especially since it's such a popular function. However, if we were dictating to someone unfamiliar with Python, they would probably write it similarly. For serious applications, it's a good idea to copy the text and paste it into an editor. From there, you can either proofread it yourself or use a large language model to help review it. If you've got loads of voice notes, transcribing them can be a huge help. Plus, if your notes are focused on a specific topic or field, you can enhance the process with a prompt. to help Whisper recognize specific terms. Okay, but let's close this chapter and move on to the new speech-to-text models from OpenAI. Recently, they have introduced new voice models. The text-to-speech is very impressive. This is likely what Hume AI aimed for, but OpenAI's model takes it up a notch. But today we will rather focus on speech-to-text, because we are talking about transcriptions. Two new models have been introduced, GPT-4o Transcribe and GPT-4o Mini Transcribe. They boast significant advancements in speech recognition and numerous advantages, including better recognition in noisy environments. I have some doubts about this, but more on that later. However, let's remember that speech recognition is not just about the English language. OpenAI presents the progress that the new models have made compared to earlier versions of Whisper. Admittedly, for many languages, the progress is substantial, at least according to the numbers. They also show their results compared to the competition, including Scribe v1 from ElevenLabs, which we will also test shortly. According to these charts, GPT seems to be better. And this is probably the time when we should move on to the next part and verify these claims. Of course, it won't be a full-fledged test, but rather a simple comparison, yet in practice. It seems to me that practical tests in many cases bring additional value and can say more than regular benchmark results. Just remember to take this process with a grain of salt. Let's check out a Python program we're going to use for the test. If you're specifically interested in writing programs that use artificial intelligence, I recommend the earlier tutorials. It's worth noting that we store API keys securely in environment variables. I won't show them, but I have generated keys for OpenAI, Grok, and ElevenLabs. Let's now take a look at the transcribe with OpenAI function. First, I read the API key from the environment variables. Next, I set the base URL for the OpenAI API. Note that I have to do this because I am not using any pre-built libraries. The same applies to manually setting the authorization header. You'll find more details on this topic in earlier videos. Next, I open the audio file for reading because I need to send its contents to the API. Then, in a special file structure, I send content of the file, the model name, because I want to test both Whisper 1 and new models. And finally, I set a text format, because it is the standard that all models support. After we've prepared the request, we need to send it using the requests library. Next, we assign the execution time to the variable elapsed. When we get the response back, if the status code is 200, which means everything went smoothly with the HTTP protocol, we'll return both the response text and the time it took to execute the query, since that's an important factor too. We also have a similar function for querying Grok. Copying functions like this isn't the best programming style, but I did it on purpose to keep things clear and make each function simpler. The same goes for querying ElevenLabs API. So we have three functions that let us send transcription requests to different models supported by three AI providers. In the main part of the program, we start with the tedious checking parameters, but what is interesting is the list of models. For each provider, we define models that we want to test. So, for OpenAI, we have Whisper 1, their open source, classic, excellent, speech-to-text model. Then there's GPT-4o Transcribe, which is a better and slightly more expensive new model, as well as its mini version, which should be faster, although slightly less accurate, but cheaper. When it comes to Grok, we have three variations of the Whisper model. If we assume that Whisper Large v3 is equivalent to what OpenAI offers, then the turbo version should be faster but less accurate. The cheapest is the distilled version in English, but it may be significantly weaker. We'll see. For ElevenLabs, we only have access to the Scribe v1, which is also quite a new speech-to-text model. The rest of the code consists of also duplicated fragments that are responsible for executing a query for each group of models. Nothing particularly complicated. It's time to test it in practice. I will launch a separate terminal for better readability. First, We will test a high-quality recording that you are already familiar with and see what each of the models reads from it. I provide the name of the MP3 file as a parameter. Answers are starting to appear, and they look quite correct. Note that the first part of the statement is generally recognized the same way across all models, including punctuation. Differences only begin to appear when we get to specific names. It's also worth mentioning the query time, which seems to be in Whisper's favor. SAPAll could be written more in SAP style, whereas DeepSeek was read incorrectly. The unfortunate function load_.env is rather written in a standard way. When it comes to GPT-4o transcribe, it has to be admitted that it's quite good. I was surprised by a SAPAll being transcribed very correctly. DeepSeek is also okay. The function name is rather unfortunate, but besides that, definitely a positive. GPT-4o mini transcribe definitely disappoints with a long execution time, even longer than its bigger sibling. When it comes to quality, it's SAPAll as usual, but in general better than Whisper, because DeepSeek was correctly recognized. Function name, as always. Grok are masters when it comes to speed of inference. Response time is clearly lower than with OpenAI models. And see how it looks in these simplified models. We've gone below a second. Accuracy is perfectly fine. SAPall is recognized as usual. DeepSeek is correct. Function name is everywhere else. Whisper Turbo also performed quite well. In fact, you could say that it's at the same level as Whisper 1 from OpenAI. DeepSeek was recognized incorrectly, while everything else is definitely okay. The DSteel version definitely performed worse, but it is indeed very cheap. There are clearly a few errors. Fiori. ST22 written with a hyphen. DeepSeek without a capital letter and a strange function name. Not perfect, but fast and cheap. Scribe from ElevenLabs looks a little bit different than the rest, but it is completely correct. The transaction ST22. SAPAll, like everywhere else, DeepSeek correctly. The function name is written differently, but is it worse? Time isn't much worse than Grok, but let's make sure it's not just a coincidence. I'll run the script again, and we'll see if the timing patterns are consistent. 2 seconds of Whisper from OpenAI. New models after 3 seconds. On the other hand, Grok about a second. And ElevenLabs just under 1.5 seconds. Very similar to before. When it comes to quality, I'd say GPT-4o is top-notch. But if we're talking speed, then Grok takes the lead, though ElevenLabs is surprisingly impressive as well. Time for the second file of much poorer quality. Here's a recording using a weaker microphone from farther away. Let's find out if the models can still understand what I'm saying, despite the low quality. The quality is worse, but there are no difficult words, so the models should manage quite well. Let's see. The file is smaller, so you can also see a higher processing speed. Once again, Grok demonstrates its capabilities and performance. However, if we look at the quality, essentially all the transcriptions look identical, perhaps apart from completely negligible punctuation differences. Point for Whisper at Grok for speed, otherwise a draw. For the test, I further deteriorated the quality of this recording by playing it again, and recording it with a microphone as test 3. Here's a recording using a weaker microphone from farther away. Let's find out if the models can still understand what I'm saying, despite the low quality. What do you think? Will there be any problems with understanding the voice now, or will it be as correct as before? Typically, models manage poor sound quality pretty well. So even if your microphone is a bit far away, you can still use programs like AI Voice Keyboard without any problems. It seems to me that the only mistake here was made by 4o mini transcribe, meaning the new OpenAI model is not so perfect, at least with poor sound quality. The rest of the models, fully correct, although of course Whisper with Grok is as usual the fastest. The next sample will be really difficult, at least for a human. I recorded it by placing my phone 2 rooms away, so the volume and quality are really poor, and I don't even know if you'll hear anything when I play it back. This is a recording captured by my phone lying in another room. Therefore, the quality is very low. Will the models manage to recognize anything despite that? We'll see what result comes out of this. Old good Whisper completely correct. No objections at all. GPT-4o didn't manage because there is no second sentence. There's no denying that 4o Mini also disappoints, as it got the ending of the first sentence wrong. The basic Whisper in Grok performed excellently, but the cheaper and faster models clearly had issues. It's through low-quality recordings that the models class is visible. 11 Labs was perfectly accurate. It's a very good model. So this time only the new OpenAI models and the simplified Whisper failed. I won't even play the next 3 recordings in full because there's little to hear. It's the same recording as before, but for each subsequent one, I added increasingly stronger white noise to introduce as much interference as possible. This is a recording captured by my phone. This is a recording captured by my phone. This is a recording captured by my phone. As you can hear, especially in the third recording, the noise is already clearly dominating over the speech. Let's start with the first sample with the least amount of noise. And here, the clear hallucinations begin. Mostly in the middle of the recording, where the quality is the worst. The rest is recognized correctly. 4o didn't excel again and didn't recognize everything. 4o Mini made even more mistakes. In my opinion, this is further confirmation that these new models perform very poorly with low-quality recordings. I have no doubt that the level of errors here is significantly higher than in the case of Whisper. Whisper in Grok is facing the same issue in the same spot as Whisper from OpenAI. There might be some major disruptions in that area. Interestingly, even the turbo version performs similarly, which is much better than the new models. Only the distilled version has more errors, but still better than the 4o family. The Scribe from 11 Labs is fine, which is not surprising. That means the problem is exactly in the same place as the rest, and apart from that, completely correct. Let's move on to the sample that contains 100% more white noise. However, we can see that usability is already becoming problematic. OpenAI's Whisper already has enough hallucinations that it pretty much makes it unusable. Although compared to the new 4o model, it is still much better, because at least something similar is recognized. 4o Mini at least recognized a few words. It's strange that supposedly a worse model is doing better, although of course only slightly better. Surprisingly, Whisper performed really well on Grok. Interestingly, the results are exactly the same as when we used it with OpenAI for the previous, less noisy recording. We even have the same wording/hallucination. The simplified Whisper models didn't perform well, which isn't surprising. Analyzing them further probably isn't very useful. However, there's a very interesting case with 11 Labs, because here again, we have the same hallucination about another drink, even though it's a completely different model, and I said nothing about a drink. Nevertheless, 11 Labs performs better than the new OpenAI models. Let's now look at the third most noisy sample. Again, the noise level has been doubled. Honestly speaking, at this point, I almost expect nothing from the models, because the level of noise is really high. When it comes to Whisper and OpenAI, only individual words are recognized and nothing more. New models completely hallucinate. Whisper in Grok also didn't perform very well. When we look at simplified models, we will see that it's complete hallucination, and it's even difficult to find single words that would be in the right place. Let's not forget how challenging this sample was. At the same time, the model from ElevenLabs didn't do well either. But take a look. The last sentence is almost correct. Because of that, I'm inclined to give it a point. Alright, let's wrap things up. Who do you think came out on top in this battle? I've put together a summary, but keep in mind that these results are fully subjective. This test isn't related to any professional benchmarks and only reflects my specific experience and personal impressions. For simplicity, I also removed 2 smaller Whisper models on Grok. Let's start with the first test. In my opinion, all models did great in this test, but 4o Transcribe impressed me by correctly writing SAP all, for which I give it an extra point. Meanwhile, Grok dazzles with its speed, for which it also gets a bonus. The second file also turned out to be easy, so all models receive 1 point each. Despite the distortions, the third test also turned out to be easy, but 4o Mini made a mistake and loses a point for it. In the recording from the other room, the models performed surprisingly well, even with the poor sound quality. This makes the errors of the new OpenAI models even more disappointing. When we added noise, the errors were everywhere, more or less evenly distributed. Only 4o Transcribe performed significantly worse. When we added even more noise, the hallucinations were so large that I can't give anyone a point. For the final test with the worst recording quality, I would like to give credit to ElevenLabs for at least partially reconstructing the text. And now, let's talk about another category: open source. This is something that's really important to me. Whisper was developed when OpenAI was more aligned with its original principles, and that's why this model was released as open source. It gives you independence and the flexibility to use this model not just through a selected provider, but also locally. For me, this is a major plus, which is why I'm giving it 2 points. Thank you, OpenAI. It's a shame you're not continuing in this direction. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the verdict. There could only be one winner: Whisper. I'm sorry, Scribe, you were close, but you are not open source. Alright, let's summarize this somehow. The new models disappointed me, although initially they seemed to be quite good. At least the benchmarks indicate that. But it's probably also the case that they are very effective, but maybe with better quality recordings. In my test, they simply didn't work. I'm sorry. They surely have other advantages. I think they might be significantly better than the competition when we do live transcription instead of a pre-recorded files, because that was always a weak point for Whisper. Besides, it's likely that over time these models will get better and better. Since they are hosted, we won't even know when OpenAI introduces improved versions. However, for me the biggest drawback is that they are part of a closed ecosystem. We can use them cheaply, but we are somehow tied to OpenAI. And there's one more thing worth mentioning. See how easy it is to eavesdrop on us and convert our speech into text for further analysis. It's really terrifying. And finally, I'll mention AI Voice Keyboard. If you're interested in this program and would like to try it out, visit my website. There is also a video on the channel with a link to this website. I hope you enjoyed the episode and found it useful. If so, please give it a like and subscribe. If you want to share something, write a comment. Thank you for your attention. May your words always be correctly understood, not only by artificial intelligence. See you next time.